While it might have been Demon Souls that began the Souls-like subgenre, it was really Dark Souls that cemented the popularity of the stamina-based action RPG. It dragged FromSoftware into the forefront of the games industry, and it added fuel to the fire for those creating ultra-difficult games that really push the player's skill level. Now it's time for fans to step back to the very beginning with Dark Souls Remastered, when it releases on all current platforms in May. What's going to be fascinating is seeing how existing fans of the genre take this in their stride. Certainly interest in this series and the genre has been at its highest around the release of Dark Souls 3, and with many people bound to have been coming to the series for the first time in this generation consoles, this could also be the first time that they take the opportunity to play the first in the series. It's often held up as being the most difficult game in the trilogy, but perhaps that was simply just the newness of it all. Certainly the level design has been improved over the years, and the flow of combat has been tweaked in the wake of Bloodborne in particular, and different builds have been strengthened to cater to more styles of play. But there's also the fundamental groundwork of this style of action RPG that players will now be much more accustomed to. I will readily admit that I'm not the best person to discuss this. As you might be able to tell from the background video, I am perhaps not particularly good at these games, but with the remaster, perhaps those who've only played later games in the series will be able to take to it like ducks to water, quacking mockingly at its supposed difficulty levels as they do. The fundamental formula has changed very little over the years. Then, as now, you're presented with a sprawling world to explore, full of tight passageways, shortcuts to open, and enemies to defeat, which you do in order to collect their souls. There's bonfires at various points where you will respawn when you die, or you can sit down at them for a moment to cash in your collected souls to level up and restore your Estus Flask health charges. Oh, and there's the now famous manner in which any souls that you've collected are dropped at the exact point of your death, should the foe stacked against you prevail. This then tests your ability to repeat your run to that point and challenges you to go one better each time. While having played Bloodborne and some of Dark Souls 3 readied me for the bleak environment, the muted palette, and the decaying maze of castle-like passageways, and even Miyazaki-san's love of surprise dragons early on in the game, I'd forgotten just how claustrophobic these games can feel. This is especially true early on as you try to break out of the undead asylum. There might be torches lining the otherwise lightless corridors, but it's really your character that symbolically provides light to their surroundings, and you struggle to see even just a few meters ahead of you. It doesn't get much better once you manage to get outside and breathe comparatively fresh air, and even once you're whisked away to Lordran and you're given a much larger environment to explore, there's always a feeling of the rest of the world being shrouded ever so slightly in shadow. That's amplified by the way that the original visuals have been brought up to the current generation. This has primarily been a step up in resolution, with 1080p on the base PS4 and Xbox One, while Pro and One X get what Bandai Namco describe as upscaled 4K. In other words, this is something between 1080p and 2160p. Considering its age, the game looks pretty good, and textures are filled with grimy detail, even if geometry is rather basic by modern standards and was already a few steps behind the curve at its original release. But it's a shame that they haven't gone back and redone the backdrops and skyboxes, where they might have given a feeling of a kind of depth of field effect to the game on last generation. Here they just look a bit blurry and out of focus, muddying the otherwise very sharp visual design. What home console players can absolutely put behind them is the sometimes unsteady 30 FPS of the PS3 and Xbox 360. On PS4 and Xbox One, the game is now at 60 frames per second, making your inputs all the more responsive and dumping even more blame for each and every one of your deaths onto your shoulders. Those looking forward to the game on Nintendo Switch will have to do with 30 FPS, but thankfully this is native 720p when playing the game handheld and 1080p when docked. For PC gamers, they can move on from the much maligned Prepare to Die edition of the game, which saw the community having to step in to patch and fix the game's woes, from poor optimization through to the 30 FPS cap and the muddy sub 720p resolution. Now there is native 4K and 60 FPS support with the remaster, though that might be a bit of a slap in the face for those who bought the original release and would have loved to see some meaningful post-release support. Another improvement comes in the form of the expanded multiplayer, which jumps from up to 4 players to 6 players inhabiting the same world. This increases the dangers of delving into the game's mixture of cooperative summons and the potential player invasions that can result from that. Dark Souls Remastered is an opportunity to step back to nearly the beginning of FromSoftware's resurgence. Their brand of action RPG has come to the point of defining a new subgenre full of imitators and attempted innovators, but it's fascinating to see just how solid the foundations that FromSoftware built upon still are some 7 years later. Add the ability to play at 1080p or 4K and with a much higher and sturdier frame rate, and there's no doubt that this is most definitely a remaster that people have been hoping to see. Thanks as ever for checking out our video, and I'm sorry for being a bit rubbish at Dark Souls. This is actually the first time that I've played it. Still, I hope this has been useful to you, and before you go, I'd like to ask you to like, subscribe and share if you have enjoyed it. You can also come visit us over on the6axis.com, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!
Ah!